my name is Sarah Coates. I'm the public programmer at the Royal Canadian Regiment Museum.
And I'm Alanna Rayner, the Collections Registrar.
Today we're going to be taking a look at another ration from the museum's collection.
Yes, and this is an emergency ration from the South African War. So let's take a look and explore what kind of place this ration would hold in a soldier's diet during the war in South Africa.
First, do you want to tell me a little bit more about the conflict that this was used during?
Of course. So this emergency ration would have been issued to a soldier during the South African War, also known as the Boer War. It began in 1899, and Canada would initially send a force commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Otter. The first contingent was the 2nd Special Service Battalion, Royal Canadian Regiment of Infantry, and this was the first time the Canadian government sent soldiers overseas.
We are very lucky to be able to have artifacts connected to members of this unit in the museum collection, including this set of emergency rations. This set actually belonged to a Private Kenneth Johnston.
Yes, and these are stored in a very interesting type of packaging. So originally these two pieces would have been connected, and there would be a metal band around the middle that had a pull tab to separate them. And you can see some of the labels have survived.
Before we go into the rations themselves, can we take a moment to talk about the technology involved in creating them? South Africa is a long way from both Canada and Great Britain, and the soldiers would need to carry these rations in a variety of environments and weather. They would need to be very stable.
Yes, and actually the British military had been making use of canned food since the early 19th century. And the process involved heating and sealing the food into these tins, and once it had been heated and sealed, it remained sealed until it was used. This process prevents the food from spoiling rapidly.
This canning process would mean the rations would be safely preserved and help them survive for the long transport to the soldiers. Were there any concerns at the time?
Actually, yes, and there were debates in the UK House of Commons in 1903 because a large number of these rations had been deemed unfit and needed to be destroyed. But there was quite a conversation about the nature of the issue and who or what was at fault.
But these ones managed to survive. They were not destroyed, nor were they consumed by the soldier who carried them. So we get to talk about them now today.
Correct, and these are only meant to be eaten when given the direct order from an officer.
We actually have a very interesting account written by a Gerald Cadogan, which was a pseudonym for Private R.R. Thompson, who served with the 2nd Special Service Battalion, who provided a description of when you were allowed to eat these rations. He wrote, "When we started fighting in 1899, we were each presented with a cylindrical-shaped article which we were informed was an emergency ration. I was not told for what purpose it was intended, but warned not to interfere or attempt to consume this wonderful article under any circumstances. In fact, I should first endeavor to digest my haversack, water bottle, and helmet before touching my emergency ration." The article will go on to talk about the temptations and consequences of eating rations without being ordered to. But overall, the message implies that there were not many reasons where the soldiers were given to eat these rations, and they were not meant to be part of the daily rations for the soldiers.
No, these were not part of the soldiers' daily rations. The emergency rations contained beef in the one tin and cocoa paste in the other, but they're not very big.
You're right, it seems like a very small amount of food, though the style of food does seem similar to the other rations that the soldiers would have been receiving. When they were not able to obtain fresh rations, hardtack and preserved beef were some of the non-perishable items that they would be relying upon.
Supply routes were important for providing food to the soldiers. There were wagons that would typically follow the forces with the needed foodstuffs, but those were reliant on the supply routes not being disrupted. And Lieutenant Colonel Otter writes of an occasion where 200 wagons were captured, which meant that the soldiers were on short rations for 4 weeks.
We're actually looking at the emergency rations today, not short rations. Could you explain a little bit about what short rations are?
Yes, well, in the most general terms, short rations are daily rations that are less than the standard of the day. This could occur for a number of reasons, including the challenges of keeping those supply routes in contact with the main force, wagons getting captured, and spoilage. Charles Tweddle, a member of the 2nd Special Service Battalion, wrote in his diary on the 25th of February, 1900, "We got 2 biscuits and a half for today, and tomorrow, of course, we get a bit of boiled meat for dinner. but it is all like India rubber, almost impossible to masticate it. We will have tea soon, just plain tea unless we eat some of tomorrow's hardtack. And the next day, Tweddle wrote, he, referring to Lieutenant Colonel Otter, was aware that we had worked very hard these last 2 weeks and that we were not properly fed. But having looked into the matter, he found that we hadn't fared worse than the other regiments as far as work and grub were concerned. He said we would be issued 3/4 rations today and that in a few days he hoped we would get our full rations.
It is really interesting when you're able to read accounts from individuals who are actually there. This helps us further understand the experiences that they would have had and helps us understand how the rations fit into their daily life. We have a very interesting account from a war correspondent, Stanley McCowan Brown, and he writes about a typical day in the military camp at Belmont, and he goes through and includes information about the rations. He describes rations in camp as butterless bread and a hot beverage would form the breakfast ration, though there's usually some sort of extra to supplement like jam, butter, or milk depending on what that individual had managed to acquire. Dinner is the midday meal, and it is when the meat is provided by the quartermaster to be prepared depending on the skill and wants of the men. And at the end of the day, the rations would be very similar to the breakfast ration, once again returning to that hot beverage and butterless bread. We have mentioned some of the types of rations issued to the soldiers. Supplementing those rations through looting and buying were notable ways that the British and Commonwealth soldiers would augment their rations.
Yes, and as made clear in the diary of Charles Tweddle, looting was not allowed, and those who were caught were to be punished. At the same time, he still saw many cases of it occurring. On March 14th, he writes of another soldier who was court-martialed for stealing a chicken, and he got a rather light penalty of 56 days field imprisonment versus the full penalty, which was death.
He also writes on the 16th of February when they were bivouacked outside of the town, where soldiers went into the town and began to take livestock and fruit, as well as ransacking houses. Though he indicated they were lectured about not looting, he makes no indication that anyone was punished in this particular incident.
Yes, and as you mentioned earlier, soldiers did also spend their own money on extras to augment their rations, and throughout his diary, Tweddle makes note of the amount of money he's paying on these extras. Though it hasn't survived on this example, labels on other rations in other museum collections show that this small amount of food was calculated to maintain a soldier's strength for 36 hours if consumed in small portions.
I guess it's really practical to have something very small. It makes it very easy to carry around, though it doesn't really feel like a lot of food for 36 hours. Though I guess it is framed as an emergency ration, not a standard ration. The beef here can be eaten dry, with or without a biscuit. In this case, they're probably referring to hardtack. Hardtack is very dry and very firm, which helps it keep for a very long time.
Yes, and both the beef and the cocoa paste could be added to water to create a drink, though this required access to clean water, which could be quite an issue depending on where the soldiers were.
Yes, the limited access to fresh water would prove to be something that comes up over and over in these reports and is often connected to many of the illnesses that was experienced by the forces. Charles Tweddle describes in his diary some of his interactions with water in this campaign. He noted how that lack of water impacted the soldiers. On the 13th of February, he wrote about how he was so parched that when he saw a dam with water, he and other soldiers rushed to drink, even though it was described as such rotten water. The soldiers were drinking and swimming in the same water that livestock had also waded in and were relieving themselves in.
Oof. So from this and other accounts, you can see that getting water was quite a challenge and must have had a very distinct impact on those serving.
This just shows how food and water are critical to life and how military campaigns can make that incredibly apparent. We are very lucky to have different accounts to draw from which talk about the experiences of the 2nd Special Service Battalion and give us insight into how they would have felt about looking towards their next meal.